Study Session 5, Utility, Introduction. In this study session, we will further explore the demand side of the market by looking at the satisfaction that people derive from consuming certain goods and services and how this leads to the concept of demand for goods and services. Learning outcomes. When you have studied this session, you should be able to 1. Relate the concept of utility maximization to demand for goods and services. 2. Show consumer behavior when acquiring multiple products with the same satisfaction using indifference curve. 3. Analyze the relationship between household budget and indifference curve. 4. Apply consumer surplus to cost-benefit analysis. 5. Point out maximum points of utility. Utility is the satisfaction people derive from their consumption activities. The assumption is that people try to allocate their incomes so as to maximize their satisfaction, a goal that is referred to as utility maximization. This satisfaction will tend to increase as the consumption of the good increase. The summation of all the satisfaction that a consumer derives from the consumption of a good is known as total utility. Table 5.1 shows that as more and more oranges are consumed, the total utility derived from the consumption increases until it gets to quantity 5, where it is maximum. An additional consumption of orange leads to reduction in the total utility derived from the consumption. Total utility from orange consumption. Quantities 0, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. Total utility 0, 50, 90, 120, 140, 150, 40. Marginal utility dash 50, 40, 30, 20, 10, minus 10. Marginal utility. Marginal utility denotes the amount by which total utility changes when consumption changes by 1 unit. The third column in the table shows the marginal utility values that correspond to changes in the consumption of orange. From the table, it could be seen that as the consumption of orange increases, the total utility derived from the consumption also increases. But the marginal utility indicates that the increment in total utility is at a decreasing rate. For instance, at quantity 1, the total utility is 50, but at quantity 2, total utility has increased to 90. However, this increment is not as much as in the quantity 1. Hence, it is the marginal utility that can enable us to know the extent to which the total utility is increasing. As quantity consumed of a good increases, marginal utility derived from each additional consumption decreases. The tendency for marginal utility to decline as consumption increases beyond some point is called the law of diminishing marginal utility. In other words, the law of diminishing marginal utility is the tendency for the additional utility gained from consuming an additional unit of a good to diminish as consumption increases beyond certain point. The indifference curve. The concept of utility, as discussed, is useful when a consumer consumes only one good. In real life, however, individuals consume more than one good at the same time. Assume that a consumer consumes a combination of 2 or more different commodity bundles, such as gari and groundnut, bundle A, bread and butter, bundle B, rice and beans, bundle C, and beans and plantain as bundle D. Suppose that commodity bundle A and B give the consumer the same level of satisfaction, while commodity bundles C and D also yield the same level of satisfaction, but which is higher than that of A and B. The consumer will be indifferent between the consumption of A and B. Similarly, it will be indifferent between consuming commodities bundle C and D. However, the consumer will prefer any of C and D to any of A and B because C and D yield greater level of satisfaction. The consumer's preference can be represented by indifference curves. An indifference curve, IC, shows the combinations of goods and services that give a consumer the same level of satisfaction. Figures 5.2 shows indifference curves representing combinations of A and B, that is IC1, and C and D, IC2. The further away the indifference curve is from the origin, the higher the level of satisfaction it represents. Indifferent curves are downward sloping and they do not intersect. Household budget constraint. The household budget constraint shows the various combination of bundles of commodities that a household can purchase at a given level of income, given the price of the commodities. If the household decides to consume a bundle of commodity, then the budget constraint shows the maximum amount of the bundle of that commodity that the household can buy at a given price over a certain income level. For instance, if the household income is 1,000 naira and the price of the bundle of goods, say A, is 10 naira, then it means that the maximum amount of the good that can be bought at that level of income is 100 units. Also, the maximum amount of another bundle of good, say B, at price 20 naira that the household can buy is 50 units. Graphical illustration of budget constraint is shown in figure 5.3. However, within these two extremes, the household can combine certain amount of the two bundles of goods that will exhaust its income. Thus, it is either these extremes or combinations of the bundle of goods that can be purchased within the household's income that is called the household's budget constraint. Consumer surplus. This is the difference between the highest amount that a consumer is willing to pay for a product and the price that he actually pays for it. The term consumer surplus sometimes refers to the surplus received by a single buyer in a transaction. On other occasions, it is used to denote the total surplus received by all buyers in a market or collections of markets. Thus, consumer surplus is a quantitative measure of the amount by which buyers benefit as a result of their ability to purchase goods at the market price. It is the area between the demand curve and the market price. Utility maximization rule. The utility maximization rule says that spending should be allocated across goods so that the marginal utility per naira is the same for each good. For the consumption of a single product, utility is maximized at the point where the marginal utility is equal the price of the product, that is, MU equals price. In the case of two goods, say X and Y, utility is maximized at the point where the ratios of mu of X to its price is equal to the ratio of mu of Y to its price. That is, marginal utility of X over price of X is equal to marginal utility of Y over price of Y. The example of two goods utility maximization can be extended to many goods, and in this case, the utility will be maximized at the point where MUA over price of A is equal to MUB over price of B is equal to MUC over price of C, and so on. Summary. In this study session, we examined the concept of utility. We related the concept of utility maximization to demand for goods and services. We show consumer behavior when acquiring multiple products with the same satisfaction using indifference curve. We then went to analyze the relationship between household budget and indifference curve. You are subsequently exposed to how to apply consumer surplus to cost benefit analysis and point out maximum point of utility. This is the end of study session 5. Thanks for listening.